Hi there. So in this video, I want to give you my perspective on how to start an AI business in 2025, why I think the time is perfect to get into the space right now, why I think current professionals with domain expertise are ideally positioned to capitalize on this opportunity, and with so much happening in the AI space at the moment, I'll try to cut through the noise and show you step by step what to learn, what not to learn, how to actually monetize these skills, and how to market yourself. If you don't know me yet, I'm Ben. I am not a coder and got into AI last year after my first startup went bankrupt, and my life has completely changed since then. My AI agency has taken off. I also run a community with more than 500 professionals, business owners, and AI builders that are getting a foot into the AI world themselves. I've experienced the opportunity in this space firsthand, and I want to show you why I think there's such a huge opportunity for non-technical professionals like me to transition into AI, which I'll get to later in this video. I'll separate this video into 3 sections, which in my opinion are the 3 fundamental things to get right in order to be successful in the AI wave. In the first section, I'll go over the best monetization strategies and business models for different types of people. Then I'll do an AI crash course where I'll break down the 3 main AI skills to learn in 2025. And lastly, I'll cover how to actually market yourself and get clients effectively, which is often overlooked, but is arguably the most important of them all. And I'll finish off by giving you a clear action plan to get started in AI today. This is a video I wish someone had shown me before I started my journey in AI. Now, I'm not pretending to be some guru with all the answers. It's just a full breakdown of my own lessons and from what I've seen is working for others around me in my community and in the AI space. Now, this is probably not the only way, so take anything that makes sense to you and discard anything that doesn't. So firstly, what do I mean with getting into AI? I mean getting a skill set in AI that will allow you to ideally position yourself in the market and to monetize that position effectively. Whether that's as an employee, transitioning into an AI agency, an AI SaaS, or even taking your existing non-AI agency or business to the next level by adding AI into your own workflows. So why now? Why even consider moving into AI as a professional? First of all, the global AI market is projected to hit $2 trillion by 2030, and studies by McKinsey suggest that by the mid-2030s, over 50% of current knowledge worker jobs could be automated by AI. Whether it fully replaces your role or not, AI is the next general purpose technology. It will impact every industry, change how businesses are run, and reshape every profession, yours included. Soon, AI and automation will become one of the fundamental departments inside of businesses, and in the upcoming years, every business will be forced to adapt and adopt AI and automation into every part of their business. And the people who can use and understand the technology behind these systems will become extremely valuable in the marketplace. And the ones that don't will lose their edge. So learning these skills right now isn't just helpful, it will define your entire career trajectory. Secondly, for the first time in history, you don't need a technical background to build powerful systems and products for people and businesses. With no-code tools and AI, you can now take your ideas and transform them into prototypes in days and in production-ready systems in weeks. As Naval Ravikant said, learn to sell, learn to build. If you can do both, you'll be unstoppable. AI and no-code tools now let you do both, even if you're not a coder. And I can tell you from my perspective, having developed this combined skill set is single-handedly the biggest reason for my career growth over the last 2 years. And if you're a professional with existing domain expertise, whether it's marketing, finance, sales, or any other, this shift plays right into your strengths. Why? Businesses don't necessarily only need technical people to implement AI and automation on itself. They need people that use these tools and the technology to resolve real business problems. And the people who already understand how companies work and what businesses need can now also actually build the systems that solve those needs. And that, in my opinion, is a superpower. And I can tell you from my experience, if you commit even 3 months to learning these no-code tools and really understanding AI's capabilities, you will be ahead of 99% of the world and you'll be able to build some incredible things. But the time to move really is now, while most people are still on the sidelines. Which brings me to the first chapter, AI business models. Now, before giving you a crash course on the most important AI skills to learn, I want to give you an overview of how you can actually monetize these skills, what are the best business models in AI and automation, and how do you actually offer these kinds of services. Over the past year, I've tested a bunch of different business models and offers myself, and I've also had the chance to connect with many other successful founders who've taken different approaches to AI in my community and through my network. And from from all of those conversations and my own trial and error, I've narrowed things down to what I believe are the 5 most effective business models in AI and automation right now. But before I dive into the 5 business models that I think are most interesting, there's one crucial point that most successful founders in the space have in common. They usually don't sell AI on itself. AI by itself is just a technology, and businesses aren't necessarily paying for a technology. They're paying for solutions that actually move the needle. The real opportunity is in identifying and solving real business problems using AI and no-code tools. This is another reason why I think professionals have such an edge, because they naturally have more experience working on and resolving real business needs. So the 5 opportunities and business models I'll go over are the AI Automation Agency, which you've probably already heard of because it's most talked about and is a great place to start for beginners getting into this space. Then we have the AI Productized Services model, which can be really interesting for existing non-AI agencies or businesses, but also for freelancers, consultants, or people with specific domain expertise. Then we have the Service as a Software model, which is sort of new and popping up in this AI wave, not to be confused with traditional software as a service, which is the 4th one, right? AI SaaS. And lastly, we have AI education. I think demand will grow exponentially in the upcoming years for all of these business models because, again, companies will have to start adopting AI and automation to stay competitive in the marketplace, and the majority will lack the in-house expertise to do this by themselves. So either companies will have to hire expensive AI talent, which is scarce, or outsource these services to third-party businesses and agencies. Now, to be clear, some of these business models overlap a bit, and the biggest difference between the first 4 at least is the amount of individual customization required for each client. Now, the first one, which I think most people watching already know, is the AI Automation Agency model. Now, in this model, you essentially offer automation services to increase efficiency, reduce costs, or solve specific business need. Now, this is also the model where the highest degree of customization is required per client. Now, I've separated this model into 2 types, which is the general AI automation agency and the niched AI automation agency. In the general AI automation agency model, you're basically very widely focused and implement almost any type of automation solution for a very wide variety of industries. Now, this is a model I don't recommend for most people starting out in the space, except if you maybe have a very technical background, maybe you're a development agency transitioning into AI, or if you have access to a big developer team. The reason is because the variety of projects is going to be very wide, which means you always have to start from scratch. You'll have to learn lots of different technologies and solutions from the get-go. It's hard to understand all the company needs, as you can't have domain expertise in all areas of business. And because of it, you'll spend huge amounts of time scoping out projects, understanding what needs to be built. And this is the phase where, in my experience, a lot of deals go bust. And each project requires a lot of time, and you'll have to price your services at a really high price point, which makes it harder to close a deal. It's also going to be harder to market yourself as you're not addressing a specific need or industry. But I still see many people trying to jump into this model at the beginning, which is sort of understandable if you don't necessarily know where to start or have a specific solution or industry in mind yet. But I still think that the second option is the better place to start for most people, which I'll go over in a second. That being said, there are definitely examples out there of successful general AI automation agencies. For example, my friend Henry at 4day.ai, they have a more technical team and can implement very custom projects for a very wide variety of industries. And it can also be a great way to start, as along the way you can discover specific solutions or industries that have high leverage to niche down into later. Then the second one is the niched AI automation agency, which I think is best for most people starting out in the space. This is what I started when I started in AI, and I also called this the fractional AI model. Some people call it the AI officer. But in this model, essentially, you focus on automation solutions for either a specific industry, like real estate or recruitment, or for a specific department, like sales or marketing. Or you can niche down even further by combining these two, like sales automations for real estate companies. Now, this makes sense for most non-developer professionals that are transitioning into AI. Why? Because first of all, you want to focus on a niche you have some expertise in. Firstly, because most valuable automations require at least some domain expertise to actually drive good results. A programmer that has never done sales before can definitely make an automated outbound email system, but most likely it's not going to get very high converting emails. A salesperson designing the same system will probably get way better results. Secondly, you have a clearer target market and offer, so it's easier to market your services and present a valuable offer and a solution to a common business problem. Besides that, most businesses are messy. They don't have clear SOPs or processes in place. And a lot of times, besides just automating existing processes, you're actually establishing or improving the process in the first place before setting up an automation. And again, domain expertise is key here. And lastly, because you niche down, you can start reusing more and more automations instead of starting from scratch each time. A great example is Brandon, who founded agentautomation.ca, who's also a member of my community, who focuses on automations for real estate businesses because he has a background in real estate. And although for all real estate companies, automations will require customization, and each real estate agent or company will have their unique little workflows and processes, generally real estate companies will have similar processes, and therefore more and more of his automations can be reusable, and therefore his agency can scale. Now, if you want to check out more of Brandon, I'll also make sure to put his link in the description below. But essentially, you can position yourself as the in-house automation or AI department for a specific business or department within a business, or both. Most companies are still trying to wrap their head around what's actually possible and what can be done with AI and automation in that company. So usually in this model, you provide a mix of consulting, implementation, and coaching. So you figure out what processes can and should be automated with the founders or the department heads, right? You implement the right tools and automations and keep refining and adding new automations month after month. Another example is Alex, who founded salesautomated.ai, who's also a member of my community, who has background in sales and noticed many of the work of BDR and SDR roles can be automated with AI. So he has positioned himself as a growth partner agency where he helps companies acquire and convert more leads by implementing outbound and inbound sales automation systems. I'll also make sure to put his link in the description below too if you want to learn more. Now, the key with this model, from my experience, is to position yourself as a partner instead of a builder. And as a partner, you're not just automating existing processes, you're actively thinking with a business to enhance their current processes. And that's again where the domain expertise will really give you an edge. Now, many people might be insecure if they can find enough or new automation opportunities within a company, but trust me, you will. There are so many processes in most businesses that should be automated. Most companies have done nothing with automation yet, and most business owners will already have quite some ideas when they approach you, and if not, they'll come up with them very quickly after they see what's possible after implementing one or two of these automations. We have yet to see one company that after starting doesn't already have a long backlog of next automations they would like to implement. And again, as you're positioning yourself as a partner, you want to also price your services as being a partner. What worked by far the best for us is a subscription style partnership rather than project-based pricing, right? So you get a paid retainer, and in exchange, you handle ongoing discovery, maybe weekly or bi-weekly consulting or meetings, and automation implementation. I personally scaled this model to $25,000 a month when I was still working alone with just 5 retainer clients, right? Each paying $5,000. I dedicate roughly 1 day a week per client, but this of course can be adapted to any range, right? We now charge a lot more, sometimes 2 for a more intense commitment, but because of the subscription model, you get consistent income. You'll have a long-term relationship with clients who rely on your expertise to keep them ahead of the game. Now, the subscription pricing instead of the project-based pricing also keeps the ball on their end, so you don't have to endlessly scope out projects, make proposals, negotiate constantly, and go back and forth. Like, we saw a huge spike in conversions and revenue when we changed from implementation-based pricing to subscription-based pricing. Some of these agencies, especially in the lead gen space, can even ask for a rev share or for success fees for booked appointments, for example. Now, as these kinds of services are very new to most companies and many companies don't know any other company or founder yet who has done this, you will get some objections, especially with this business model. For example, the most common ones we get is like, what do I actually get for my monthly fee, or how long does each project take? Now, in my experience, it helps a lot if you have a small portfolio of example automations you can show along with typical timelines of implementation. So they get an idea of what they can expect and how long it takes. Usually clients also have 1 or 2 automations in mind already. When they approach you, giving them a timeline on the delivery of those also usually helps. We also have a cancel any time policy and a money back guarantee if they're not happy after the first month, which has helped some of them take the leap. And if they're still on the fence, which again sometimes happens, we sometimes charge a separate lower fee for a smaller initial AI automation implementation to show them what we're capable of and that these systems can actually work. And then we get them over onto the subscription model. Now, the amazing thing with this model is that almost all companies have stuck with us even after 6 months of being with them. But as said, even though you might be able to reuse more and more templates, because this model requires a higher degree of customization for each client, it is also harder to scale and can mostly scale through hiring more people. Now, if you want to stay alone, this can still be scaled to a really decent MRR with very minimal overhead. But it can also naturally transition into a model that is more scalable, like the AI Productized Services model. So the second one is the AI Productized Services model. Now, like I said, this model can be a natural transition from the niched agency model, but can also be an ideal model to start for existing agencies, consultants, freelancers, or people with specific domain expertise. The Productized Services model is much more like a traditional service delivery company or agency. You're delivering a specific, repeatable solution to a well-defined business problem, like a lead generation agency or a marketing agency. The big difference being by automating and enhancing and systemizing your backend service delivery with AI and automation, you can, first of all, enhance the value of the offer, and second, scale to levels that traditional agencies could never scale to. A great example of this is Brooks, also a member of my community who founded GoPipelineFormula.com. He has a lead generation agency that helps SaaS founders generate leads by building their personal brand through content. He records 1 interview or podcast with the founder per month, and the AI system he created automatically creates hundreds of pieces of content out of that 1 podcast that will be scheduled automatically across the founder's social media for the whole month. Now, important here, he is not selling AI, he's selling lead generation. And of course, there's still some work involved, but because he systemized and automated most of his backend service delivery with his AI content repurposing automation, he can scale this model to incredible numbers without growing his team. I'll also make sure, if you want to learn more about Brooks, put his link in the description below. Another example is Tal, a friend of mine who had an existing cold email agency, which he productized even further with AI and automation. Tal does cold email lead generation for M&A companies and M&A deals, and he niched down to only M&A companies, so his outreach processes are very reusable for each new company, and he uses AI personalization and automation to do mass outreach while maintaining highly relevant emails, high open rates, and reply rates. Tal also did a full masterclass in my community on cold email, so if you're interested in that, make sure to check it out. I'll put his link in the description below too. Now again, this model can be great for existing agencies, freelancers, consultants, or professionals in, for example, lead generation, email marketing, etc. Because creating high-quality automations and systems that actually deliver results across a variety of clients requires usually a lot of domain expertise and experience. And because the service is productized and automated, it allows you to really scale to really interesting numbers. And because you're solving a specific business problem, clients are willing to pay a premium. Many have the ability to charge an implementation fee plus a revenue share and a monthly retainer, especially in the lead gen space. Now, the biggest challenge with this model is to make sure the solution delivers consistent results across different clients while maintaining minimum customization. And while it's way more scalable than a general agency or even a niched agency, there's still some ongoing work and customization involved. So another natural transition for productized services could be to transition into the next model, which needs even less ongoing work: the service as a software model. Now, this is sort of new, and that is popping up in this AI wave and is not to be confused with traditional SaaS or software as a service, but basically it's like a plug and play out of the box automation system that solves a specific business need. If you have developed and optimized a productized service or a niched service so much that it requires almost no customization, can be completely self-serve in the long run, and requires close to zero maintenance or support, this model can be really interesting for almost infinite scaling. We have developed one of these over the last months and are starting to roll this out. Basically, we started with a productized service for SEO content generation, and we have optimized and productized it so much that it can now be plugged in any existing company within a couple of hours. It's a completely self-serve platform on Airtable and basically acts like an SEO agency for a client. All the client needs to do is add a topic and the system does the rest. It finds the best keywords, decides on the content it has to write, adds meta titles, does competitor analytics, writes multiple SEO optimized articles with images, tables, and posts them on the client's website. While they are both self-serve solution and they can definitely overlap a bit, the key difference between traditional SaaS and service as a software is that traditional SaaS usually provides tools or software that assists users when working on a specific use case, but still requires them to manage the process and make the decisions. Service as a software, on the other hand, handles almost the entire use case and process by itself and delivers a completed outcome, requiring very limited involvement from the client. For example, in the SEO space, an example of a traditional SaaS could be SEMrush, right? It assists a user with SEO content generation. It provides keyword research, content analytics, competitor insight, but the user must still create the content, optimize it, and implement a strategy for themselves. For the service as a software, it takes over and handles the entire process. It generates, optimizes, and publishes SEO-driven content automatically. The system handles almost everything from start to finish. Another example of this is Jonas, a friend of mine who offers voice agent solutions for hotels in Germany with Aura AI. He is productizing his service so far that he just needs to customize the system for a few weeks to meet a specific hotel's requirement, and then the system runs for a client in the long run with minimal maintenance. He's able to charge an implementation fee plus a usage-based pricing model that can of course be scaled up to very interesting numbers. If you want to learn more about Aura AI, I'll also make sure to put his link in the description below. And as it almost entirely takes over the service delivery of a traditional agency or employee, therefore it's called a service as a software. And again, because it can replace expensive agencies or people, this can really be sold at a premium implementation price with usage costs or subscription fees, because companies will save huge amounts of money in the long term. We are planning to develop more of these kinds of solutions, but I'll keep them for myself until we have launched them. That being said, this of course sounds like an amazing business model, and it is, but if you haven't already been working with productized services or niched as a niched agency and really have developed a specific solution that can solve a need across different companies, then it's probably not the best place to start. Then the fourth one is AI SaaS, which is the traditional software as a service model. Now, I've run a SaaS before, and I hear many people on the internet saying that SaaS is dead. But I think many people talk about the existing overpriced enterprise SaaS applications out there, because with AI and AI agents, SaaS or even custom software for businesses will now be able to be built at a much lower cost, meaning that the price points for many of those overpriced SaaS softwares might become hard to justify very soon. But this opens up an opportunity for new AI SaaS softwares, I think. And if we look just past enterprise software, I think they're going to be very interesting opportunities. First of all, because with these no-code and low-code tools and AI coding agents, it's literally never been easier and cheaper to launch a minimum viable product. And second of all, as with AI, a lot more value can be packed into a product and can be developed at a much lower cost. SaaS softwares can now be made for very specific niches that were previously maybe underserved, because creating a specific solution for that niche would previously be too difficult or too costly. A great example of this is from another member in my community who preferred to stay anonymous. He had a meta ads marketing agency for very small business owners in Germany. and he started automating some of his own processes with AI. And basically he saw that a lot of these small businesses lacked the domain expertise to set up meta ads themselves, but also many didn't have or don't have the marketing budget to hire an agency. And as he had a lot of data on what type of ad creatives and ad copy worked best for these types of small businesses, he made it into a self-serve platform where these small business owners can create high converting ad creatives and ad copy with AI themselves. He launched his MVP in a matter of weeks with a backend system almost entirely set up through no-code platforms like Make.com, and grew to $50,000 in MRR in less than 3 months. Now, note here that the customer is still in charge of the process, and therefore it's not a service as a software, but a software as a service. Also, Y Combinator's latest batch with almost exclusively AI SaaS has been one of the most successful and fastest growing batches ever. But I do think, again, that for most people that are new to the space and transitioning into AI without an extremely strong go-to-market team or experience or an existing audience or distribution leverage, it's probably not the right model to start with. For most people, it makes more sense to at least start with a niched agency or maybe a productized service or even a service as a software, which gives you that experience on what to build, how to systemize it so far that it could potentially become a self-service platform. Secondly, SaaS will become a double-edged sword because tech and product will be more and more democratized, right? Very soon, anyone, including non-coders, will be able to build powerful products with AI coding agents and these no-code softwares. And therefore, the competition will also be much higher. And the moat or the competitive edge of businesses, I think, will shift more and more towards deliverability and distribution instead of the product or tech. And the ones that are best at reaching their target audience and having the distribution channels will win. So even if you have a groundbreaking AI tool, it won't matter if you don't have a really good go-to-market team or existing distribution channels. That's why, again, I usually recommend starting as an agency or productized service first. You'll be able to discover a pressing real-world problem that AI can solve. You can refine your solution with actual customers, and then potentially you could consider turning it into a standalone SaaS product. Because the best SaaS ideas often emerge when you're repeatedly solving the same problem for different clients. And also, you will have built some distribution and marketing channels that can actually make your SaaS reach your target audience. Which brings me to the last one, AI education. Now, I'm not going to go in depth in this video because this would be a video on its own, but there's a gigantic opportunity coming in the AI reskilling and upskilling market. Most people talk about all the job losses that AI will bring, but few people talk about the massive amount of new jobs it's going to create. As businesses and the world need to adapt and adopt AI, these new jobs will require skills that most people simply don't have yet today. This will create a massive scale gap in the market in the upcoming years. Literally billions of people will need to be retrained and upskilled to meet the demands of an AI-powered economy. This presents huge opportunity for both B2B education, right, helping companies reskill their workforce, but also B2C education, helping individuals stay competitive and capitalize on these new opportunities. But even if you're planning to go the educational route, I still highly recommend to actually learn how to implement these real-world automations, as it will really help you understand where the potential lies also in this educational industry. Now, lastly, I touched upon a few of these, but there are a couple of things I'd recommend you avoid doing, especially when you're new to the space. I think the first trap, which I myself fell into a bit, is when non-technical people learn these no-code tools or agents and discover that for the first time they can actually build really powerful applications and automations. Usually the first intuition is, how can I standardize a product and basically make a SaaS out of it, charge on usage costs so I can scale this and get recurring revenue. This is generally, in my opinion, a pitfall because of 3 reasons. First of all, because most of these AI automations and solutions drive real business value only when customized for each business. For example, once the solution is integrated into their softwares. For example, an inbound lead research agent or tool might be great for salespeople, but only when the research data actually appears directly inside of their CRM. If they have to trigger this manually, it's an extra step, an extra software in their tech stack that people are not going to use and businesses don't want. Secondly, good products don't sell themselves, especially again as tech is being being democratized more and more, where non-tech people can build anything with these no-code tools and coding agents, the mode of businesses will shift more and more towards the deliverability instead of pure product alone. And if you have no existing or direct client network, big distribution channel, or huge go-to-market experience, you'll likely not be able to sell your solution enough. And thirdly, you learn only what a good product is by working on and implementing this into companies. And the best way to do this is by customizing the service first, improving the system step by step. Once you've implemented the service in multiple companies, you've likely learned a lot about what a potential SaaS could look like. Therefore, the most logical path to AI SaaS for most people is to start with a niche or general agency, identify interesting use cases first. When you have found these high leverage automations for a specific niche or productized service, you can then potentially transform it into a SaaS. The second thing I would avoid is the pay-per-project model for these automations and AI agents. Firstly, because almost all companies will need lots of automations. We have yet to see a company that only needs one. And with the pay-per-project model, you're constantly adding friction to the process by having to scope out projects, get proposals out, and negotiate. It's hard to get continuity going, which is going to hurt your cash flow and the perceived results for the company. With a subscription model, the ball is on the client side. They have to take advantage of the subscription, you get consistency and continuity, and in the end, it's a win-win for both you and the client. On a similar note, charging by the hour, I don't think makes sense in the AI space. I've never done it because, again, clients shouldn't be paying you for your hours, they're paying you for outcomes. And hourly billing just caps your earning potential, positions yourself as a builder, again, instead of a partner, and dilutes your perceived value. Lastly, consulting is another model which I've done and recently quit, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend if you're starting out and you don't have a big audience. It might sound enticing to just consult without the actual implementation, but in my experience, you can get so much more leverage and value out of these deals if you actually take charge over the actual implementation. So that brings us to the next chapter, AI Crash Course. Now, with this overload of information and AI tools, what should you actually learn to start one of these AI businesses? I've broken the fundamental skills I think you should learn down into 3 skills, and I'll give you a crash course of the fundamentals of each of these skills. And the 3 skills, in my opinion, are prompt engineering, AI workflow automation, and AI agents. But before I go into them, I want to break down 2 questions I get asked a lot. Firstly, should I actually learn the tech by myself? And if so, which softwares should I learn? Now, to address the first question, should I learn the tech, right? I usually tell non-technical professionals, right? You basically have 2 options, right? You either partner up with someone with a technical background or a technical skill set, or second, you learn the no-code tools yourself. And I know for many non-tech people, even these no-code tools might seem pretty daunting at first. And the first intuition might be to just partner up with someone. However, my recommendation is usually to actually learn at least the fundamentals of these tools, even if your plan is to eventually partner up. Why? 3 reasons. The first one, domain expertise is what almost always gives these solutions value. As I said before, for many, not all, but many of these solutions, domain expertise is actually what drives the value and results from these agents and automations. It's not just the tech. A tech person with 0 marketing knowledge automating a newsletter system will most likely result in bad and low converting email copy. The real value and strength of these systems comes when a marketer, right, with domain expertise injects his domain expertise into these systems to actually get high quality outcomes. Secondly, you actually know what's possible. Even basic familiarity with these no-code AI tools will help you recognize which tasks can be quickly automated, what the scope of projects are, and will allow you to speak with confidence to clients. And you'll also be able to speak the same language as any future technical partner you work with. So you can actually challenge ideas, right, refine them, and avoid over-promising on features to clients that are simply not feasible. And thirdly, and most importantly, it is not rocket science, right? These no-code AI tools are much less intimidating than they first appear. Speaking from my own personal experience, I managed to learn most of what I needed in about 3 to 6 months. And if you focus on the 20% of the skills that matter most, you can start building really highly effective automations without becoming a hardcore developer. And I've boiled it down to 3 fundamental areas you need to know for 2025, which I'll cover in this section. But once you nail those basics, we'll realize that your value in the marketplace 10x's, because 99% of people will not learn this. And I think the real leaders in the AI wave will be the generalists. So to address the second question, which softwares should I learn? Is it N8N, Make.com, Relevance AI, VoiceFlow, Flowise, Lindy? Now, take this with a small grain of salt because this is a bit of an oversimplification, but I made this canvas to give you a better idea and to help you choose which software to learn. In simple terms, on the x-axis, we have the ease of the use of the tools, going from really easy to use on the left to more technical on the right. And on the y-axis, we have platforms focused more on AI agent building at the top and platforms more focused on workflow automation at the bottom. Now, important to keep in mind is that generally the easier a platform is to use, it will of course mean you will be able to master the tool faster, build automations faster, but it also generally means higher usage costs and less customizable or flexible. This can be great for simpler use cases, fast deployment of automations, and for not extremely high volume use cases. But of course might limit us in terms of customization and flexibility for more custom projects and workflows. For high volume use cases, it also means significantly more usage costs. For example, a platform like Zapier is very easy to use. You'll be able to deploy an automation very fast, and it works great for simpler workflow automations, but will cost significantly more than a platform like Make.com or N8N. A platform like N8N or Pipedream will have significantly lower cost, will allow for more complex workflows and automations, but the learning curve is a bit steeper and it will take more time to set up automations. Secondly, although on most platforms you can build both, some have a stronger focus on AI agents building and some more on traditional automations and AI workflow automations. Now, both are core skills you should learn in 2025, in my opinion. Knowing that, what softwares should I learn? Now, if you come from a non-technical background or a non-automation background, my initial recommendation is to start with a combination of Make.com and Relevance AI. Now, of course, this is a bit biased because this is what I learned at the beginning, but both of these platforms are really intuitive when you just start out, have a low barrier to entry, and still allow you to be really flexible and to build more advanced, complex systems. Make.com will teach you workflow automation, help you learn how to connect softwares and APIs, initial prompt engineering, and data management and data transformation. Relevance AI will give you an intuitive agent building framework to start learning how to build AI agents and AI agent teams. And once you get the hang of these platforms, or if you already have some experience with automation or you're a bit more technical, my recommendation is to start trying to work with N8N, which again is a bit more technical and has a steeper learning curve, but has the big advantage of having both strong workflow automation building and agent building in one platform, lower usage cost and self-hosting capabilities. And of course, if you're a coder, you can also consider going for coding frameworks like Crew AI, LangGraph, and LangChain. VoiceFlow and Flowise are also popular platforms and shine mostly, in my opinion, for more chatbot use cases, as they were traditionally more chatbot builders, so they can be interesting to explore for those types of use cases. Now, lastly, it is also important to understand that most of these softwares have very similar setups and infrastructures. So learning one will mean your skills will be very easily transferable to other platforms if you want to switch. The real skill you'll learn when building these systems is how to architect these solutions. And that knowledge is very transferable to any of these platforms. My recommendation is try a few, check the one you like most out of any of these really, and just start building some automations, which in the beginning is the most important step anyway. Now, let's start with the first one, the main fundamental skill to deploy reliable, functioning, and cost-efficient AI systems is prompt engineering. This is also the part where your domain expertise really makes the difference in making a mediocre automation system or a highly valuable system. Injecting your knowledge inside of these prompts is what makes these systems generate valuable outputs. Now, this might not be the sexiest topic and it's really not rocket science, but most people still don't really know how to prompt efficiently. The main reason being is that most people are used to prompting inside of ChatGPT, which is actually very different from prompting inside of these AI systems. In ChatGPT, we use conversational prompting. Therefore, we can go back and forth multiple times with the model until we get the desired outcome. And therefore, we don't really need to implement these proven and studied prompt engineering techniques. when we prompt inside of AI systems, we don't have the flexibility of that back and forth tweaking. We need to get the system to generate a good, reliable, and consistent output every time, even with the edge cases. And that really does require good prompt engineering. And the best way to make sure we use prompts that are efficient, reliable, and incorporate those best practices is to use frameworks. Prompting frameworks structure your prompts in a way that makes it easy to include proven and studied techniques, but maybe more importantly, gives you a repeatable framework to make sure you always include everything that you need to include to get consistent and quality outputs. I have a full 50-minute prompt engineering video on my YouTube channel too, which I highly recommend you watch, but I'll give you a quick breakdown of the most important things here. So let me go over the 3 frameworks that I consistently use in my own AI systems. Now remember, this is not the only way. There are lots of ways to efficiently prompt, but this is just what works for me and what I use. So firstly, I have the long structured prompting framework, then I have the short structured prompting framework, and lastly, the agent prompting framework. Now, the long structured framework, I generally use this for more complex tasks, and it includes 7 sections. Now, the first one is the role. In this section, we want to give the LLM or the language model a role and qualities, which is studied to lead to an increased performance. Let's say, for example, I want to write a prompt to write a job proposal for my company. An example of this section could be role, and I use the hash to get the header. You're a world-class HR specialist with particular expertise in writing engaging job proposals. So in this section, besides the role, we also really want to hype up the model and tell it how good it is at something. Then we have the second one, which is the objective. Now, in the objective section, we give the model a direct description of what needs to be done. You can think of this section as what you would put into ChatGPT. For example, objective, your goal is to write a compelling job proposal to attract talented people to join Ben AI. You think step by step through the following process. 1, you'll carefully read the job description in the variable section. 2, you'll write a compelling job proposal using the specific structure as laid out in the examples. And 3, the proposal should explain the role, highlight key responsibilities, and motivate candidates to apply. Then the third one is context. Now, in this section, we want to give the language model more context on why it's doing this task and how this task fits into the bigger picture. For example, context, Ben AI helps businesses automate processes using AI and automation solutions. This job proposal is crucial for helping Ben grow his business and to drive client success. Now again, giving these language models more context on why this task is important can, again, improve outcomes. Then the fourth one is the instruction section. Now, in this section, we go into more detail and include all the important rules and specific output formats if you have them. A good way to think about this section is to predict what could go wrong and add these in the form of rules to this part of the section. For example, instructions, you will always use the same format and structure as in the examples below. You will never make up facts about the role, and it is vital to my career. You use no more than 150 words. Now, this "it is vital to my career" might sound a little strange, but this is what they call emotional manipulation tricks, which again might be able to actually increase the performance of these models. Then we have the example section, which is one of the most studied and most important sections of your prompt. Giving input and output examples are really key for reliable outputs because you give the language model an idea of what it should do with a specific input. I would always recommend to include at least 2 examples. Now, a good and fast way to do this is by first running a language model without this section to generate an output example with the best language models. You can then tweak the output if you need to and then add them to this section. The way I usually do it is with input and output. Now, then we have the variable section. The variable section will change, of course, based on the specific context or variables for this specific task. For example, this prompt could be part of a tool that could generate me job proposals for different kinds of jobs. So the variables could be job title with the variable, description with the variable, and salary with the variable. And then lastly, we have the notes section. Now, this is actually a pretty important section because LLMs actually take the beginning and the end of prompts more into account than instructions given in the middle of the prompt. So the notes section can be really great to double down on important rules, specific output formats, and can also be great for when you see that your language model struggles with a specific thing while you're testing it. You can add that specific rule to correct it to the notes section, and you usually see that it corrects itself immediately. For example, you see that the job proposal is too long the first time. You could add something like, "It is vital to my career. You are concise and use less than 150 50 words in the job proposal. Now, as we don't always need really long, detailed prompts for very simple tasks, we also have a short structured framework that is basically a reduced version of the long framework, right? So in this one, usually what I have is the role and objective, which I put in one. Then I have the example sections and the variables if we have any variables. Because they're simpler tasks, we don't need all the other things. We can use this framework for simple tasks because sometimes when we have simpler tasks and we use these really long prompts, language models actually get confused. And lastly, we have the framework for agents, as agents usually have more decision-making responsibilities and they also have access to sub-agents and tools. We make a slight adjustment in the framework. So we have role, objective, SOP, context, instructions, sub-agent and tools, examples, notes. Now, as you can see, we have two new sections in this agent prompting framework, which is SOP. In the SOP, we basically give the agent more instructions on how to execute a specific task or query. So we give it more context on in which sequence it has to perform actions, use tools, use sub-agents, etc. And in the tools and sub-agents section, we give our agent more context on what tools and sub-agents it has access to, because it's very important for agents to understand what these tools can do, when to use them, and what they can expect from these tools. Now, when do we use which prompting framework? This really depends on the use case of the prompt and the complexity of the task. Now, in very broad terms, there are 6 main types of prompting use cases in AI systems. Now, take this with a grain of salt because there are many nuances to this and many different use cases and complexities beneath each of these categories. But I'll try to give you a general guideline for which type of framework to use and which type of language model to use for each of these types of use cases. Firstly, we have extracting data. Now, these are use cases where an LLM should extract data from a larger context or summarize something from a given context. For example, finding a specific URL from a scraped Google search result. Now, in general, for tasks like these where LLMs have lots of context, LLMs are usually very good at this. So we can usually get away with using the short structured framework and cheaper language models. But again, this does depend on the exact use case and the complexity. Now, secondly, we have classification or categorization. These are use cases where an LLM should categorize, for example, categorizing an email. Now, LLMs, again, in general, are very good at this. So usually we can get away with short structured prompting and cheaper language models. But again, if we have very specific and subjective categorization, we need to give more context to the model, and then long structured prompts will probably be more appropriate. Then we have generation. These are use cases where LLMs should generate something, right? Like text, image, or video. For example, generating a report, an image, a job description, right? Now, these are one of the hardest tasks for language models and where we see the most hallucinations occur. And therefore, it's best to give language models as much guidance as possible with long structured prompts and to always use the best models. And for more important and more complex tasks, you can even consider using these System 2 level thinking models like GPT-01. Then we have evaluation. Now, these are also common use cases inside of these systems, as sometimes we try to build in extra steps to evaluate outputs generated by the system to make sure we got the right results out of other language model steps. A common use case, for example, is to evaluate whether a RAG output actually matches the original query from the user or answers the original question. Now, again, language models are generally pretty good at these tasks, but given that these tasks are usually very important for functioning, reliable systems, we should use the more expensive, better models and generally longer structured prompts, but sometimes we can get away with shorter ones. Then we have data transformation. These are use cases where an LLM should transform or restructure data in a new format or structure like HTML, JSON, or just plain restructuring of a text in a specific format. LLMs can sometimes struggle with these tasks, and with new features like structured outputs, this does become easier when these LLMs are evolving. But in general, you'd want to use long structured prompts or at least use the better, more expensive models in my experience. And then for the last one, we have decision making, which of course is the most common use case for AI agents, which I'll get to in a second. They will have to break down queries, plan out actions to be taken, orchestrate and delegate tasks between tools and sub-agents. Now, this is one of the hardest tasks for LLMs, and therefore we should always use the agent prompting framework and give it very detailed instructions. And as this decision making requires planning and complex tasks, these are in my opinion ideal for system 2 level thinking language models, and therefore I predict we'll see most agent systems working best with these types of models, right? Like the GPT-01 model. But even if you don't use those or you don't have access to them yet, always use agents with the best models possible. Now, besides good prompt engineering, for these AI systems to become reliable, it is also key we limit the amount of responsibilities for one language model or AI step as much as possible. LLMs struggle most when we try to give it multiple tasks inside of one prompt, so we always want to reduce it down to one specific small task. This is one of the most common mistakes I see beginners make, right? They try to let one language model do too much and too complex things, and the system starts to break. So what do we do then? When we have complex tasks, that's where chain prompting comes into play. And with chain prompting, we basically break down a larger, complex task into smaller subtasks for each language model or AI step and chain them together to perform the entire task. We use the output of the one model as an input to the next model, and this makes an AI system perform complex tasks in a reliable and consistent way. I think a good phrase that I recently heard, which I think can help you when you're designing and optimizing these systems, or when you don't get the outcomes or the performance out of your system that you want to, is the solution to the problems of AI is usually more AI. If you don't get the right outputs, the solution is usually adding more steps in your chain of prompts, or in the case of agents, adding in more tools or sub-agents. Lastly, it is very important to understand the language models that are available to you and to understand the strengths and weaknesses of each one to get the most reliable and cost-effective system. Now, we can broadly define two types of language models. We have the System 1 non-reasoning language models, and we have the System 2 reasoning language models. Now, beneath each of these categories, we have two subcategories. We have the cheaper mini models and the more expensive models. Now, for the System 1 level thinking language models, which are generally the cheaper and faster models, these models are generally great for these simpler use cases and to keep the cost low. Each of the language model providers has their own types of these language models, like in OpenAI. Generally, these are the mini models like GPT-4o mini. And then the second subcategory is the more expensive models that generate generally better and more reliable outputs for more complex tasks like GPT-4o and Claude 3.5. And then we have the System 2 reasoning language models. These models have reasoning built in and can therefore handle more complex tasks like math, coding, and advanced planning. Right? These systems do take more time and use significantly more GPUs and are therefore significantly more expensive. So we don't really want to start using these models for simple, straightforward tasks. But these models can become really interesting for these more dynamic and complex tasks that require high reliability, like for agents, for example. We have, again, two different types of these models. We have the cheaper models. Now, these models are the mini version, but as they're reasoning models, they're still more expensive than many of the main or expensive System 1 thinking models. And then lastly, we have the most expensive models that use the highest amount of GPUs, models like GPT-01 and GPT-03, which was recently released by OpenAI. Now, again, these models should only be used when we try to do really complex things or when we need very high precision. And I also think, again, that agent systems might be very interesting for these types of models. Now, the second main scale is AI workflow automation. Now, this is the scale where you really start blowing people's minds and is the most practical scale and maybe the lower barrier to entry way to start really leveraging AI for real business impact. Now, what do I mean with AI workflow automation? This is the more traditional way of automation and automates tasks and processes based on logic and predefined rules. This differs from AI agents, as AI agents don't have deterministic logic when they make decisions. But it's actually what I think most people should learn before learning AI agents, and is what businesses most of the time actually need to automate their everyday processes. In workflow automations, we connect different softwares and databases with APIs so we can send, transform, and receive data through those softwares. This way of automation has been used for decades, but with language models and AI, these systems have become 10 10 times more powerful as we can now actually analyze, transform, and take action on the data before outputting it into the next software. And this basically allows us to automate and enhance a lot of tasks that humans do and what automation traditionally could not solve. For example, in the pre-AI era, popular automation workflows were a lead filled out a lead form and that data gets automatically added to the company's CRM. Now, by simply adding an AI step or a language model in between, we can do vastly more powerful stuff. We can research the lead before actually outputting it into the CRM, but we can make it even more sophisticated where we add in another AI module to do the lead scoring, right? And we can then add another one to actually call the lead if they're qualified or send a personalized email. And learning how to do this really is not rocket science. With these no-code platforms like Make.com, N8N, Pipedream, anyone can really learn how to set up these really powerful AI workflow automations in weeks without knowing how to code. But even though it's straightforward, there is a little bit of a learning curve involved, and most people simply will never go through that. And therefore, if you learn this, you will really be part of the 1% AI experts with only learning this. The main practical things you need to know and understand for AI workflow automations are first, analyzing and mapping processes, right? The second is APIs and webhooks. Then we have data types and transformation. And lastly, testing and error handling. Just the fundamentals of these concepts are usually enough to build your first automations, and the way you learn most is by actually building some automations. But I'll give you a very quick breakdown on these 5 fundamental skills. First, for analyzing and mapping processes. Barely anyone ever talks about this, but this is arguably the most important skill, which is understanding a current process or workflow in a business and then actually mapping it out in a process that can be automated. This might seem easy, but the reality is most businesses and people are messy. Most businesses have no detailed SOPs, and most business owners can't even completely describe a task or workflow to you in detail themselves. So your job is usually to first really understand the task, understand the process, the desired output, and then map and design the automation. Now, this is again another reason why domain expertise and existing business experience will be so valuable in this process, because you understand business needs and can inject your knowledge in designing and optimizing these systems and processes. Now, the easiest way to do this is by mapping out how the process should work through a diagramming software. I personally use FigJam. Some people like Whimsical, but there are tons of others out there. And I just map out what the steps in the process should be and what the inputs and desired outputs in each of the steps should be. Now, it's really important to do this before actually jumping into the automation, because you can save a lot of time like this. Then the second one is APIs and webhooks. Now, this is where many of the non-coders immediately throw in the towel, but trust me, APIs are really easy, and with no-code platforms, it becomes even easier. And most of the time, we don't even have to set up a custom API or HTTP requests anymore, as many of these softwares have native integrations set up with the most popular softwares. So very quickly, what exactly are APIs? APIs, or application programming interfaces, are what allow different softwares to share data and work together. They make automations possible by enabling information to flow between tools. Think of it like giving apps a structured way to talk to each other. So to understand APIs better, I'll give you a quick example of creating a contact in HubSpot, right, through an API call. So first we have endpoints, and endpoints are like specific addresses where the API is accessed, and each endpoint represents a specific function or resource. For instance, to create a contact in HubSpot, the endpoint could look something like this: post hubspot.api.com/contacts/v1/contact. Now, through the endpoint, we basically tell HubSpot, hey, I want to create a new contact. These endpoints for different actions are usually really easy to find in any app's documentation page. Then we have HTTP methods. APIs use these methods to define what kind of action you're taking. The most common ones are get, and it's usually used to retrieve data from a software. For example, pulling a contact's details. Then we have post, which is usually used to create something new in the software, like our contact in HubSpot in the example. Then we have put or patch, which is usually used to update existing data or to edit, a contact's details. And then we have delete, right, to remove data. Now, in our example, we are using post because we're adding a new contact. Then we have headers. Headers carry metadata about the request. Think of them like instructions for the API on how to process the request. right? So for instance, the most common ones you'll see are authorization, right? And this tells the API who you are, right? And it's usually done through an API key or token, and to check if you're actually allowed to send data to the software, right? And then the second one you'll see very commonly is content type, and this specifies basically the format of the data that's being sent to the software, right? So in most cases, that will be application JSON. Now, for HubSpot, for our example, the headers might look something like this. Header 1 would be authorization, and there you'll have bearer, which is commonly used before adding your specific API key. And the second header might be content type, and where we specify the type of content that's being sent or the structure, which is going to be application JSON. Then lastly, we have the request body, and the request body contains the actual data you're going to send to the software. So for creating a contact in HubSpot, this might look something like this. So we have the JSON format with the properties. We have the property key, email, first name and last name, and the values where we put the data we want to send to those properties. This is the information we're telling HubSpot to use when creating the contact. It's straightforward. It's just a list of fields and their values. Right now, what about webhooks? So while APIs are about requesting and sending data, webhooks are event-driven. They basically listen for triggers. For example, someone fills out a form and then the information automatically gets sent to another tool. So it's like a notification system between apps. Now, the great thing about these popular apps like HubSpot is that platforms like Make.com, Relevance AI, N8N often handle all of this for you already. They have already set up a native integration with these softwares, so you don't even need to do any of this or even look at the API documentation in most cases. But if you have an app that is not directly integrated, it's still not rocket science, as you see, and these basics will make it really easy to set up your own APIs. Now, then we have data types and transformation. So we also need to know the main data types, the structures, and how to actually transform them. Now, this is usually sort of the first types of errors people face when starting with automations. Arrays and JSONs sound intimidating to non-coders, but again, it's really not rocket science. And these no-code platforms, again, have all the features to transform and interpret these data types in an easy way. All a JSON is a lightweight format for storing and exchanging structured data, right? It's used in almost every modern API to transfer info to. So all it is data wrapped in curly brackets, right? With keys like email and their corresponding values, like in the example, johndoe@example.com. Arrays are another common structure, and they're just a way of grouping multiple items together. For example, picture a list of products or email addresses or task IDs you need to process one by one. Arrays basically make this really easy. For example, a list of emails might look something like this. And as you can see, arrays are formed with the square brackets. And again, if you're using these no-code platforms, you can easily loop through these lists or arrays to handle each item automatically, whether it's sending emails or updating new records or anything else. Then we have objects and nested structures. Then there are a bit more complex data structures like objects and nested data. Now, these might seem a little trickier at first, but they're just combinations usually of JSON and arrays. For example, as you can see here, the items key contains an array of objects. Now, again, might look complicated, but once you understand the JSON and arrays, the patterns become pretty clear. Once you know this, you'll know it for life. And think of it like this stuff, which really is not rocket science again, and can be learned in weeks, separates you from the 99% that will always see this as too technical for them. Then you also need to understand some about database management. It's an important skill because almost every automation or system you create needs a place to store, retrieve, and update information, right? So for example, tracking leads, managing tasks, or syncing data across platforms, right? Usually databases are sort of like the backbone, right, of your automations. Now again, not rocket science. You don't usually have to dive into complex SQL queries or become a database expert, because no-code tools like Airtable or even Google Sheets can handle most of the heavy lifting. For example, like Airtable is like a supercharged spreadsheet that combines the simplicity of a table with the power of a database, right? It allows you to link records, filter data, and trigger automations directly from tables. Plus, Airtable can really be used as a front-end interface or dashboard, giving your clients and users an easy way to interact with the system and trigger automations. Google Sheets works perfectly fine for many use cases too. Then lastly, we have testing and error handling. Now, again, not the one that's most often talked about because it's definitely not the sexiest, but it's definitely what you need to learn to actually deploy automations in businesses. No automation is going to be perfect on the first try, which is why testing and error handling are essential skills to learn. Testing basically ensures your workflow behaves as expected under different scenarios, right? While error handling makes sure the system doesn't break when something unexpected happens, right? Some tips for testing are always test with some edge cases, right? Usually people design these systems for perfect scenarios, but the real world is messy, and error handling makes sure the system doesn't break when something unexpected happens, right? For example, API calls fail quite often. Sometimes you have data formatting issues, language model hallucinations. Now, most of these no-code platforms offer built-in tools for testing and debugging, so you can simulate your workflows and troubleshoot any issues. You can also add error handling steps like retrying failed actions, sending notification when something goes wrong, or logging errors for later review. And lastly, I want to say that many people, when they start out, usually get frustrated mainly because of one of the reasons above or not understanding one of the things above. What I usually try to tell people there is that the problems you're facing now means you're basically mastering these fundamentals of automation, and that overcoming these issues is exactly what will get you in the 1%. Because most people, when they see those errors, they don't pull through. And once you've seen these errors, trust me, you have seen them all and will know exactly how to solve them in the future. And the last fundamental skill is AI agent building. So first of all, what are AI agents? What is the difference between AI workflow automation and when would we actually need to use AI agents instead of workflow automation? So in contrary to workflow automation, where different LLMs, APIs, and tools are orchestrated through predefined logic or rules, agents are systems where LLMs or large language models take charge over the workflow and decide themselves what to do to accomplish a task. They usually consist of 4 fundamental parts. At the core, we have a large language model, which is like the brain of our AI agent. Then we have tools, memory, and knowledge. Now, for the first one, as I said, there's an LLM that is in charge of the workflow and is like the brain and plans out what to do to achieve a task. This LLM is usually in the form of an agent prompt, which I talked about before, right, that defines his actions and his goals. Now, they can also have access to tools, which can perform actions either in softwares to send or retrieve data, or tools can even include prompt chains or even the entire workflow automations. Now, the third one is memory, because our agents need memory to remember the past conversations and to know what past actions it has taken. And lastly, agents can have access to knowledge, usually in the form of RAG. Now, this is used when our agents need access to a large amount of context that doesn't fit within a normal context window or prompt. RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, and although it sounds complicated, in simpler terms, all it really does is breaks down a large amount of context into very small chunks, uses an embedding model to convert these chunks into vector embeddings, which are stored into a vector database. And our agent can then query that vector database, much like a Google search, to search for semantic similarity. So when our agent queries the database with a question like, what's our company's policy on sick leave? The vector database will retrieve the most relevant chunks for that query, and that information will be sent back to our agent, who can use that information to respond to a question of the user, for example. So how does an agent actually use tools? I'll just give you a quick example. If you want to make research agent that has access to a tool to do Google search and a tool to scrape websites, we can now ask our agent with a query like, do in-depth research on how AI agents work and write a full research report. Because our agent knows what tools it has access to, it can now plan out how to achieve this task himself. For example, he might do a Google search first to find relevant blog articles with more information on the topic, then use the second tool to scrape those websites using the web scraper, and then write the research report based on what he got back, right? So instead of predefined rules or logic, our agents decide what to do themselves to achieve its goal. So when and why would we use multi-agent systems then? First of all, because at the moment, single AI agents or large language models excel when we give them single and easier easier tasks, right? They become more unreliable and start to struggle when we give them too many responsibilities or very complex workflows. When we are designing AI agent automation systems, we always want to optimize each LLM or AI agent for single tasks, right? And simpler workflows. So knowing that if we want to automate more complex workflows, we can use multi-agent systems, where each AI agent is responsible for a single task or outcome, each equipped with tools and knowledge to perform their specific task. For example, have a manager agent who uses their sub-agents to execute a more complex workflow, much like how a single agent would use his tools. So let's say, for example, that besides research, we also want our system to be able to write and post blog posts on my website, and also to be able to write LinkedIn posts and add them to my content calendar. So our research agent is already optimized to do research. So we don't also want him in charge of writing blog posts and LinkedIn posts. So we can add a blog post agent to our system who's optimized for writing blog posts, and a LinkedIn agent that's optimized for writing LinkedIn content. And the blog agent, we can give a tool to actually post the blog post on my website, and the LinkedIn agent, we can give a tool to add it to my content calendar. Now we add a manager agent to connect all of these agents together into a team, and now we can handle a more complex workflow. For example, now we can say something like, please write a blog post and a LinkedIn post on how to build an AI agent and add them to my website and content calendar. Now, our manager agent will divide this task into subtasks and delegate each subtask to a sub-agent through a prompt. So he might say to the research agent first, do research on how to build AI agents. Then the research results will be sent to the blog agent, which he prompts to write a blog article around this and post it to my website, and the same for the LinkedIn agent. This framework can be expanded into more and more layers of agents, being able to create more and more complex systems that can now handle more and more complex workflows. So when should you decide to use a multi-agent system versus a single agent? Now, take this with a grain of salt, because it is nuanced and it depends on a specific use case. But a general rule of thumb is to first always optimize each agent for a specific task. Never use more than 7 or 8 tools inside of one agent. Never more than 7 or 8 sub-agents per manager agent. And manager agent responsibilities should always be limited to team management and not to performing actions themselves. A good framework, again, to think about these systems is when you see your system struggle, the solution to the problems of AI is usually more AI. So inside of these systems, that usually means more AI agents or more tools. So when should we actually use AI agent systems instead of AI workflow automations? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of each one? Now, this is another important framework to keep in mind when you're designing automations, right? So when building automations with LLMs or AI, you should always find the simplest solution possible and only increase complexity when needed. Now, I am to blame a bit here because most of my content evolves around AI agents, but in practice, this means that for most of the business use cases, we don't necessarily need AI agents, but we can rely on AI workflow automations. In my agency, I would say that 75% of our automations are workflow automations and 25% are AI agent automations. And this also has a lot to do with the current limitations we still face with AI agents. They're still developing and improving week by week. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of each one? Now, AI agents excel when you're dealing with dynamic, complex inputs, or when you're solving open-ended problems where the steps aren't always as predictable. They're also quicker to deploy, usually because they require less logic-based setup, but they're also more expensive and more prone to errors. These systems also often need more human oversight to ensure that they are working as they should be working. But on the good side, AI agents are usually also very reusable. So once you build an agent, you can reuse that agent inside of new agent teams, usually very easily. Now, for workflow automations, these are very good for predictable, repetitive workflows where inputs and processes are more consistent. So it's more reliable in general, it has fewer errors, and is significantly cheaper to run. However, setting up a workflow automation takes usually a lot more time because it requires mapping out logic and rules for every step. Now, once it's running, of course, it requires a lot less human intervention and making it, a very efficient way to do automations for day-to-day business processes. So what are the current best use cases for AI agents? Now, besides coding agents, which I'll get to in a second, and computer control agents, there are two main use cases for AI agents for businesses right now. Now, the first first wave of business applications of AI agents that is already happening right now is customer-facing AI agents. These are text or voice-based agents that are deployed on behalf of companies to interact with their customers. For example, for customer service or sales. Mark Zuckerberg also predicts that every company will have an AI agent or multiple AI agents that interact with their customers in the upcoming years. In my own agency, we've implemented multiple of these types of AI agents over the last year on either WhatsApp, on websites, and through voice agents on the phone. Now, AI agents are already the preferred option here over traditional workflow automations, as interacting with customers and humans is inherently dynamic and requires this memory and decision making. Every interaction is unpredictable and unique, so the agent can decide on the best steps to take for each of the conversations. Therefore, AI agents are generally a better use case for these customer-facing applications. Now, the second business use case for AI agents is for internal process automation. Now, we are still in the early stages of AI agents for these types of processes because most companies and people are just starting with automation, right? Most companies have done nothing with it yet. And generally, the best place to start with companies is usually to start with repetitive, well-defined processes. And as they are well-defined and predictable, workflow automations are usually a better option for many of these internal business processes. Now, why do I talk so much about AI agents then? It's because I think slowly but surely, when these AI models and large language models become smarter, they'll slowly start to take over more and more of traditional workflow automation. If you've seen my last video about the 20 AI agent team, I think soon we can use these simple English sentences to talk to agents to automate entire workflows instead of having to program and map out these really large logic-based workflow automations. We can have an agent that already has the tools to interact with all of our softwares. We can give it a query and it can automate complex workflows without needing to build out this rocket ship automation workflow anymore. But again, at the moment, right, LLMs are still developing, and therefore I believe workflow automation will still be extremely important and a very important skill to know in the upcoming years, because in the end, businesses need automation very soon and they need these systems to be as reliable and cost efficient as possible. Lastly, I just want to go over AI coding agents, which is definitely interesting to start experimenting with in 2025. AI coding assistants like Cursor, Lovable, and Bolt are developing extremely fast and now allow everyday people to start building applications and softwares with no coding background. That being said, there is definitely a learning curve involved. Knowing how to use these tools requires time and effort. It is a very powerful skill to have, right? But I wouldn't recommend to jump into this as your first sort of skill. Why? Because the most important thing when you're building software as an application is to know what to build. And unless you already have an idea of a SaaS or application you want to build, or you have lots of experience in the AI space or the SaaS space, access to a lot of capital or a big distribution channel, launching a successful app is really hard and requires a long and sustained effort, which again prevents you also from learning the other essential skills. That being said, there is definitely a wave of solopreneurs building these micro SaaS and small apps that are being really successful. However, again, the biggest reason for those guys' success is usually they have business experience, a lot of business experience in the past, or they have a large social following and distribution channel, meaning they have an immediate audience and target market for the softwares they launch. Which brings me to the final section, and maybe the most important one, marketing and client acquisition. Now, most of the people who've done a business over the last year will tell you the same. Biggest bottleneck is usually client acquisition. This is the condition for any of these business models to actually work. And it is hard, and it will only get harder. Again, like I said before, the moat or the differentiator of businesses and people has traditionally been a lot more on the product side. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, great products sold themselves. Well, not anymore. You can have the best possible product in the market. If you don't have a way to reach your customers, it is worthless. And as social media and the software world has developed, this differentiator or moat has shifted more and more into distribution. You don't necessarily have to have the best product on the market anymore, as long as you have an audience and a strong distribution channel and a product that solves a need. And as AI is democratizing tech even even more, slowly anyone will be able to build these powerful applications and softwares. And that's why the mode will shift more and more into deliverability instead of only the product or service. So building an acquisition channel where you can consistently get clients is really key and should, at the beginning, especially if you don't have a large network or audience yet, be one of your priorities, if not the main priority. Now, there are 1,001 ways of doing marketing and getting clients, but I'll just go over the main ones that I think are most interesting and that I've seen working best in the AI wave right now. And before I dive in, I come from a marketing background, and one thing I learned from a Y Combinator talk a few years ago that stuck with me, and I think is good to realize for other people doing this, is that most unicorns grow to be $1 billion company by being really good at one acquisition channel. And I see a lot of people making the mistake to try to do a little bit of everything. It won't work. All acquisition channels are hard, and you need to be consistent, iterate, and improve continuously to become one of the top experts in an acquisition channel to get results. It's almost like a business on its own. That's how I look at it. That's why generally it's good to stick and focus on one, at least in the beginning. So the first one is building a personal brand. Now, I'm biased, of course, but I think there's a gigantic opportunity, and by far the best way to get distribution and acquisition in the AI space right now is by building your personal brand. I think there's a window of opportunity to capitalize on building a personal brand around AI because of 3 reasons, right? First of all, because AI is new and all these softwares and technologies are new, you can still position yourself as one of the top experts in a specific AI field. Secondly, there's a general trend to more personal connections over company or brand connections. And thirdly, AI content at the moment is being pushed really hard in all the algorithms on all the social channels. Now, which channels can you use? Of course, YouTube, in my opinion, is great because, first of all, you make the strongest connection with your audience of all the platforms. By having long-form content, you really build trust, first of all, by them watching you longer, and also you show what you sell. If you show AI demos or systems you've built, you immediately build trust because you show what you sell. Then, of course, like I said, the AI content on YouTube is being pushed really hard. YouTube is the second largest search engine, which a lot of people forget. And for these AI systems, maybe the first. It attracts lots of business owners and professionals. My main demographic, for example, is male between 35 and 44 in the US. And lastly, it's cliche, but we do live in an attention economy, and people value seeing real people more than ever. And it will not only get you client acquisition, but also for me personally, I've met some amazing people and friends through my YouTube channel. Now, I know it's not for everyone, and I thought it wasn't for me, but let me help you by addressing some common concerns, which I had too when I started. First of all, nobody cares. I know there are so many people that want to try this, but don't do it because it might be cringy or embarrassing to family, friends, or colleagues. First of all, when you're just starting, you will not get more than a couple of hundred of views maximum, and nobody will find you. Second of all, none of these people, unless they're actually in AI, will actually watch your videos. I know that none of my close circle has actually properly watched one of my videos. Second, you don't need thousands of views or thousands of subscribers to get leads from YouTube, right? This is one of the biggest lessons I learned, and that really convinced me to double down on this, right? I thought I would have to invest years and needed thousands of views to get clients, and I started getting my first leads after a few hundred views on my 3rd video, I think. So the YouTube algorithm is made to push your content in front of people who are looking for the exact content you bring out, right? That's the magic of it. Thirdly, you don't need to be the absolute best or the 1% expert before being able to post on YouTube. You just have to be one step ahead of your target audience. The majority of people has done absolutely nothing with this yet. You will be one step ahead of the majority of people. In fact, if you're too far ahead, sometimes you even lose some of your target audience and only talk to people who are deeper inside of the AI space, right? Instead of actual, potential clients. So maybe those frameworks can help you take the first step. Now, you can also try on a platform like LinkedIn. I'm personally trying to expand my brand a bit on LinkedIn, and I've seen some good results, but as YouTube is my main focus, I am definitely not an expert. However, there are many people in the AI space right now getting amazing results through LinkedIn organic or LinkedIn outreach, right? Or a combination of them. Jake, a friend of mine, for example, with an automation agency, is getting 10 plus leads a week consistently from LinkedIn organic only. And Alex, a member of my community, also reached 100 lead bookings with LinkedIn outreach automations. Now, posts that at the moment seem to get a lot of engagement on LinkedIn are, first of all, demos, right, of these AI systems you've built. It's the same for YouTube, by the way. Then you have these AI workflow and AI agent giveaways, which with these comments that getting lots of tractions too. And then you have these explainers or diagrams that seem to work very well too. Then X is another platform that gets tons of traction right now with AI content. Prawal is a great example, also a member of my community. He creates MVPs for businesses with coding agents, and he made more than $50,000 in less than 3 months only with leads he got through X. He does basically build in public type videos and gets tons of businesses reaching out to build these MVPs for them. Now, you can also try shorts on Instagram, TikTok, and there are even people getting traction through written content sites like Medium. But most importantly, again, try to focus on one of these when starting out. Focus on providing value and stick to it. That's the most important. Then cold email is also still a great channel if you focus on it and get good at it. With AI personalization, you can now get really high reply rates if you do it the right way. We recently had a masterclass in my community with Tal, who is the founder of Slight Edge Agency and does over 7 figures annual revenue doing cold email outreach, right? And he explained in detail how to set up email campaigns, how to do personalization the right way. So if you want to learn more, make sure to check it out. But yeah, cold email could definitely be an interesting strategy as you can get direct results and the personal brand might take a little bit longer. Now, many of the AI communities right now, including mine, also have many business owners and founders in there that are looking to adopt AI, but don't necessarily have the time themselves to do it. So we've actually had multiple client relationships built through our community. So being active in these communities, right, showing what you can, responding to people's issues and reaching out to DMs on all of these different communities can definitely be a great strategy for initial client acquisition. Then we have cold calling. Now this makes more sense for the people with a sales background, but cold calling still works if done right and if you can stomach the rejection rate. I've done some power dialing back in the days, but it's not really my thing. But for example, Jonas, who I mentioned before, selling voice agents for hotels, right? They get great results cold calling clients. Now, event speaking or conferences can also be a great way to find leads. The same example, Jonas, right, with his voice agent solution, he also speaks regularly at AI events and actually gets quite a lot of leads from them. Then we have the freelancer platforms like Fiverr, Upwork, Freelancer. There's a bunch more. Now, I think there's still a window of opportunity on this channel to position yourself as an AI automation specialist, as we're sort of still early. However, these platforms definitely do take time and effort to consistently get clients from. Right? I'm personally not a huge fan of these platforms as you're competing in a big marketplace and people are constantly trying to undercut you. But for some people and the top profiles on these platforms, it can become an amazingly consistent acquisition channel. Then we have ads. I haven't run ads myself yet as I haven't needed to, but I think there's definitely a big opportunity here too, right? Running Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook ads to AI lead magnets, for example, can definitely be an interesting strategy. We'll soon have another masterclass in my community with Moshe, who's an ad specialist who will explain how to do ads the right way. However, this of course will cost some money up front, so I would more recommend it to people who maybe have some experience in the ad space or have some money to invest. Now, of course, there are tons of other ways to find leads and get clients. Whatever your channel will be, it is vital to make this one of your main priorities. This is probably the biggest reason most companies fail. So to finish it off, knowing all of this, how should you actually get started today? First of all, and most importantly, make a commitment. This is the moment. We are still early. And trust me if I say, if you jump into this right now, you will be one of the top 1% experts still, right? You can establish yourself as an AI expert and whatever way you want to go, right? Being an employee, starting a business, you will become immensely valuable in the marketplace in the upcoming years. And the best way to learn in this space is through practice, right? It's the only way. way, to be honest. So step number one is pick 1 or 2 automations that are useful to yourself and start building them out. Maybe get a template from someone on LinkedIn or some community and try to rebuild it according to your needs. In the process, you will run into issues, can be painful in the beginning, but this is where most people give up and where you separate yourself. Join maybe some communities. There are lots of free ones out there too, where people can help you out, because most people have already run into the issues you will face and you are facing. And honestly, I can say that if you dedicate yourself to this, you will have the fundamentals in a matter of months, if not weeks. Then if you are employed, you can try to position yourself inside of your company as an entrepreneur, right? As the automation or AI specialist inside of your own company. If you have existing clients, or you're maybe a consultant, an agency owner, or freelancer, try adding AI into your existing services. Most companies have done nothing with it yet, and you will blow their mind, right? Even with simple automations, and you'll get real client experience and see what it takes to actually deploy these kinds of systems inside of companies. You can also try to build some free automations for your network, for your friends, colleagues, etc. And most importantly, while doing this, share everything you do and learn on a social channel to build your personal brand, and you will see that it picks up. Again, building a personal brand or acquisition channel is just as important, if not more important, to get successful in this space. Then once you get your first client, it will be scary, because the nature of these solutions is that every company will need a slightly different solution, and most likely you have never done that specific automation yet. But don't worry, just jump in, try to make it work, and in the worst case scenario, you wire them back their money. That's it. On a last note, I really hope you jump onto this, because opportunities like these only come around every century, I think. You are not too late. In fact, you are still early if you jump into this right now. Don't be the person that looks back and thinks, what if? Now, if you enjoyed this video, I highly appreciate it if you can like it and maybe subscribe to my channel. If you want to join my community, I'll also make sure to put the link in the description below too. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.